welcome everyone to this webinar on the Reading Borough Local Plan Partial Update Consultation. And thank you very much for giving up your evening to attend. So this is the first time we've ever run an online event regarding the local plan. And while we're pretty sure we know what we're doing, please do bear with us if there are any difficulties. Before I go any further, let me introduce the team that are here with you tonight. You're lucky enough to have the entirety of the team working on the local plan here. So firstly, I'm Mark Warringham. I'm the Council's Planning Policy Manager, and I'm leading on the production of the local plan partial update.
My name is Sarah Burr. I'm a Senior Planning Policy Officer, and I'm contributing to the partial update.
My name is Katie Jeffries. I'm the Planning Policy Officer, and I'm also helping with the local plan partial update.
I can see in the chat that there's apparently a lot of echo. Is that just when I'm speaking or when everyone is speaking?
It looks like, Richard, you were admitted twice to the meeting, so it may be that you're logged on in two places, unless it's echoey for everyone else.
Okay, we'll carry on then. So the first thing to say before we move on is that we are recording the session so that we can place it on the website for those who are unable to attend. We're not anticipating that anyone will need to switch on cameras or microphones other than the officers who are presenting. So I hope this won't be an issue, but please be aware of that. And if there is an issue with that, please email us and we can see what we can do about that after the session. So the format of the evening tonight is that we're going to go over some of the key topics related to the local plan partial update. And as we go, we'll run some polls on those topics, which you'll be asked to vote on, please. And at the end, there'll be an opportunity for a question and answer session. If you do have a burning question that you want to ask us, it'd be really helpful, please, if you could put it in the chat, ideally before 20 to 7. So then we'll have a chance to pick out the questions that we can give a verbal answer to in advance. We may not be able to answer all questions within the allotted time, but we will commit to answering all questions in writing following the session and then circulating the answers to all the participants tonight. We'll also make sure we circulate the slides, so there's no need to make any notes of what's on the slide, at least anyway. So we're aiming to finish at 7. If we do run over, we may be able to continue for a bit, but we do understand if people need to drop off at 7 and do some other things. If at any point during the evening you have technical issues with the event, please put that in the chat and we'll try to resolve it. If one of the technical issues means you can't access the chat, please email us on planningpolicy@reading.gov.uk, which is the email address that you will have received the joining link from, and we'll see what we can do. So the agenda for tonight, this is an outline of the topics we'll be looking to cover. This is far from a comprehensive list of all the topics in the plan. It's just some of the bigger issues that we expect to be of greatest interest. If you have any questions on any other topics that we're not looking to cover tonight, please feel free to also ask those at the end as well. So before we go any further, we wanted to just run a quick poll so that we know the broad makeup of the attendees tonight, and also so that everyone gets used to how to use the voting function before the more in-depth questions come. So if you could please let us know in what capacity you're attending tonight, that would be really helpful. Once you've answered the question on these polls, you can click the X in the corner and the poll will close and move out of your screen. So if we'll just leave about 30 seconds to run that poll, please.
Just posted that, so hopefully everybody can see the poll there.
Okay, I think that's probably enough time for that one. So if you move on to the next slide, please. So as background to this evening, for those that might not know, the local plan is the main document that contains our approach to development in Reading, and it's what we use as our first consideration when we decide planning applications. So it's got an important legal status. In fact, that legal status has increased due to the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which got royal assent a couple of months ago. And preparing a plan like that is quite a lengthy and complicated process. Our existing local plan was adopted as policy in November 2019. Whilst it's therefore relatively recent, certainly in comparison to many of the other authorities, all authorities have a legal obligation to carry out a review of their plans within 5 years of adopting them. Such a review looks at whether the plan's up to date and whether there's a need to amend or replace it. So we've undertaken a review of our plan in March this year, and that looked at things like changes to national policy and law, other local policies, the data that we've collected from monitoring our existing policies, both in terms of whether they're being implemented and also whether they're having an effect on the ground. Changes in circumstances, particularly related to specific sites, and also things like the results of planning appeals. The outcome of the review was that we decided we needed to undertake a partial update of the plan. And that will mean we're looking to update about half of the policies and proposals in the plan. So the current consultation is the first stage in carrying out that partial update. Now, there's a whole range of reasons why individual policies in the plan need to be updated. Some of the headlines are on this slide, but there are many more besides. But I think it's fair to say the most important issue is housing numbers. National policy makes it really clear that if the way you work out your housing need has changed, you must update your plan. This is the case for us, and we'll come on to that in more detail shortly. However, there's also issues around the type of housing that we're delivering, in particular not delivering enough affordable housing or housing of 3 or more bedrooms to meet needs. There are also a number of other important changes, for instance, our declaration of a climate emergency, followed by the publication of our climate emergency strategy. We've also seen continued development on the ground, so the circumstances on many of those identified sites have changed. And there've also been a significant number of changes at national level as the government continues to tinker with the planning system on what feels like an almost constant basis. So those are some of the most important issues. But once we've made the decision to undertake the update, there are all kinds of other detailed matters we can bring in as we prepare that update. Which is why we've ended up deciding to update about half the policies rather than the much smaller proportion that will perhaps genuinely be out of date after 5 years. So the first topic that we wanted to look at is housing, and this is because this issue drives so much of the plan. The biggest question that most local plans need to answer is how many homes you're planning for, which is normally expressed as an annual figure. Unfortunately, as a result of that, there isn't much of a way around the fact that I'll now start firing a load of numbers at you, but I will try to keep it to those figures that are most essential to understand. The first number is what our existing plan says we need to deliver, which is 699 homes per year. Now, that existing need figure of 699 was based on evidence that we prepared with the other local authorities in Berkshire on local housing need back in 2016. That looked at local demographics, employment levels, affordable housing need, and a range of other factors. At the time that we prepared that plan, we didn't feel we could fully accommodate that figure, and that led to a situation where we reached an agreement with some of our neighbouring authorities that a small number of homes to meet Reading's needs would be built outside Reading's boundaries, while we planned for a number of 689, but we don't expect to be in that position anymore. The second number to be aware of is what we would be expected to provide if we used the government's method. There's a standard methodology which is set out in national guidance, which every authority is expected to follow unless they have an exceptional reason not to do so. If you run that methodology based on the most recent figures for Reading, you come to a number of 877 homes per year. Now, that's obviously a very significant increase over what the existing plan says. And one of the main reasons, well, perhaps the main reason that that figure is so much higher is fairly simple in that the methodology applies an arbitrary 35% increase for those authorities that are at the core of the 20 largest urban areas in England. So the Reading urban area is in that list of 20 largest urban areas. One kind of interesting aspect of that is that Reading's only in that list of 20 because of the inclusion of areas outside its boundaries, such as Earley, Woodley, Calcott, and much of Tilehurst, but it's only Reading Borough that the increase applies to. So without that 35% urban increase, our need figure under the national methodology would actually be lower than what's in the existing plan. So the government's quite clear in setting that methodology that increase is a policy choice on their part. So they want to see the largest urban areas become more of a focus for new development, in particular because those tend to be the areas that have better public transport, walking and cycling links. And so higher densities in those areas is very much what national policy is pushing towards. However, in view of the fact that the national methodology is based on these kind of policy choices rather than an actual assessment of what we need locally, we've been undertaking some work to understand what our local need is now. And this has led to our consultants producing an updated local need figure of 735 homes per year. So in coming up with that figure, they followed a broadly similar methodology to the need assessment for the existing plan. So it represents an increase in the need over that previous figure, but as you can see, it's some way below that figure produced by the national methodology. You can see, therefore, the degree to which that national methodology is divorced from what we believe is actually the need in the area. So we'd hope to be able to publish this evidence by the time of this consultation, but unfortunately, it hasn't yet been finalised. There are several elements of the study that are still being worked on, such as the need for specific groups like elderly people. And we hope to be able to publish this evidence as soon as we can. The final figure to be aware of is capacity. So that's the figure we believe we can realistically deliver within our boundaries without unacceptable impacts on, for instance, local character, the natural environment, or on important local business areas. Our current estimate that is around 800 homes per year. Now, there's going to need to be more detailed work undertaken to refine that figure before the next consultation, but this is what we think is likely to be a realistic maximum for Reading. However, it's worth bearing in mind there are other external factors that can impact delivery other than just physical capacity. So, for instance, a major recession tends to hit development in central Reading very hard, as the sites often have an existing value and are complex to develop. And in recession years, as a result, our housing delivery can often be very low. So, after looking at all those figures, our current proposal is to plan for that capacity figure, meaning around 800 homes per year. That would mean that we are doing what we can to boost housing supply, which is what's expected of us by national policy, and also trying to maximise our chances of delivering much needed affordable housing within Reading. However, we want to know what you think about the number of homes that we should be planning for. So we're going to put a poll up. There are 4 options in the poll, which are the 4 figures I've just outlined. So please bear in mind when you're looking at this that we're just trying to get an initial flavour of what people think, and we're aware you may well want to think about this and the other poll questions in more detail when you make your formal response. So we're not monitoring who's voting for what, and we're not holding anyone to an answer they give. We're just trying to get an idea through this forum. If you don't feel comfortable in voting this now, you don't have to. But we'll keep the poll up for a bit of time for you to make your response, and I'll stop talking for a bit so you've got a chance to think about it. Okay, I could see we've had some votes on that, and it looks like the 735 homes per year is coming out slightly ahead of the others, but I suspect some people are still to vote. I noticed there might be some people having problems with the voting. Maybe if that can't be resolved during the meeting, just let us know what you would have voted for, and we'll factor that into the results. So it's not just about the number of homes, it's also about what kind of homes we're delivering. And one of the most significant issues that we're having to address here in Reading is around the size of homes in terms of how many bedrooms in particular. The evidence that was prepared to inform the existing local plan told us we needed approximately 50% of our new homes to be family-sized housing of 3 or more bedrooms. That's not an exact science because, of course, smaller households may well also be looking for homes of this size as well. But broadly, that's what the level of need was identified as being. But the headline is that our housing delivery has not come close to that recently. We can look at what we've provided in the last 10 years in more detail. So around 45% of the homes delivered have been 1 bedroom, including studio apartments. This kind of accommodation is frequently, but not exclusively, in the town centre. 38% have been 2 bedroom or more, 2 bedroom rather, so potentially suitable for small families, but not delivering the larger family homes that we need. Only 12% of homes delivered have been 3 bedrooms, so that's a very small proportion of the total. And finally, 5% have been for 4 bedrooms or more. In some years, you actually see a net loss of homes this size as larger homes are redeveloped for denser developments, or they're converted to flats or houses in multiple occupation. In total, therefore, we've only delivered 17% compared to the need of 50%. Now, there's a number of reasons for this. In part, the reliance on the town centre to meet much of our housing need is part of the picture, because it's much more difficult to deliver larger homes in the town centre at higher densities with more limited outdoor space. What's also unhelpful, however, is the government have allowed various forms of development, such as office to residential accommodation, office to residential conversions, to proceed without needing planning permission. And these conversions are almost invariably for small homes, frequently studio flats, and we've seen quite a lot of that kind of development in Reading. Nevertheless, we do feel that there's more that the local plan should be doing to tackle this problem. So in particular, we want to increase our policy requirement for new build developments for the proportion of 3 or more bedroom homes in all locations. In the town centre, we currently ask for 5% of homes to be 3 bedroom or more, and we're proposing that increase to 10% or 15%. In our smaller district and local centres, there's a bit of a policy gap currently, and we're proposing that in these areas, the expectation is 20%. In all other areas, we currently require 50% to be 3 bedroom or more, but we're proposing going further and requiring that such developments are strongly in favour of larger family homes by expecting 67% or 2/3 to be 3 bedroom or more. And there are other things that we're looking to do in the plan to support this, including a more favourable approach to proposals to combine flats together to create a family home, and potentially specifically requiring certain sites to primarily deliver family homes. So there's a wide range of other housing issues we're looking to address in our partial update, and some but not all of these are highlighted on the slide. I'll skip over some of this, but affordable housing remains one of the council's biggest priorities. A very large proportion of those in need of homes simply can't afford market rates and require some form of affordable housing. And we aren't delivering enough to meet all of those who need it. So meeting all of that need is likely to be impossible, but we're certainly keen to make sure that the policy maximises what we can achieve on individual sites. One of the main changes to the affordable housing policy we're anticipating is to include the tenure split within the policy itself. So we currently ask for 62% of affordable to be rented and 38% to be an affordable ownership product, usually shared ownership. But we set that out in a supplementary document that doesn't have the same status, so we intend the policy to give it a bit more weight. And in doing so, we'll also need to take account of the priority the national policy gives to first homes, which is a new type of model that offers discounted homes for sale to first-time buyers. This needs to be factored into what we ask for. We also need to look at density of housing development. national policy now expects us to set minimum densities for different types of areas, such as town centre sites, urban sites, or suburban sites. So we worked up some proposed densities based on what can usually be achieved in Reading, but we do need to make sure there are adequate safeguards, for instance, where a development is next to a listed building. We also need to be mindful about what we talked about with family housing and making sure that densities don't prevent us delivering that. And moving down to the bottom, we're also proposing to introduce a new policy to deal with co-living. And that's a new type of residential accommodation that involves large-scale communal living within smaller living spaces, but extensive shared facilities. So those facilities might include things like a gym, cinema, working spaces, and on-site events. This is a kind of accommodation that I think initially emerged in the USA and parts of Europe and started to appear in the largest UK cities such as London and Manchester. And although we haven't had any planning applications here in Reading yet, these things do have a tendency to be exported from London to Reading over time. So it's something that's very likely to come up in the lifetime of the plan. So our proposed approach to this is to ensure that this form of living is in addition to, rather than instead of, the general housing and affordable housing that we need. And also to ensure that what gets delivered is a high quality offer that provides something of benefit rather than just a very large house in multiple occupation. So having explored some of the housing issues, we wanted some feedback on the poll question on your screens now. We place a lot of asks on developers when they build new housing developments that have financial impacts on them. We ask that they provide a proportion of their development as affordable. We ask they provide financial contributions to local infrastructure, including transport, education, and open spaces. We require them to develop a high level of performance in terms of energy and carbon emissions. And we'll also be requiring improvements in terms of biodiversity. So all of these are important, but the poll question asks for your view on which of these should be the priority. Again, we won't be holding anyone to any responses here, and I appreciate it's very difficult to prioritise one over another, but we just wanted to get a flavour of the feeling in the meeting. So we'll move on to the next topic now, but it looks like so far in that poll, infrastructure is coming out top. So I'll now hand on to Sarah to talk about the next topic.
Thanks, Mark. Since the adoption of the 2019 local plan, Reading Borough Council has declared a climate emergency and developed plans to achieve net zero carbon emissions within the borough by 2030. Meeting this ambitious target will only be possible if the local plan requires the highest possible reductions in emissions and energy use going forward for both homes and non-residential developments such as businesses, schools, shops, and places of employment. In light of the increasing frequency of extreme weather events and growing impacts on residents, as well as Reading's 2030 net zero aims, we are recommending many changes to the plan that give greater weight to sustainability. By ensuring that all new development within the borough is fit for a zero carbon Reading, we will avoid the need for a costly retrofit in the coming years. These proposed changes are informed by the Council's climate emergency strategy, the Reading Climate Change Adaptation Plan, and the Council's carbon plan. Since 2019, national planning policy has also been updated to emphasize the importance of reducing emissions and energy use. The government has announced its intention to update the building regulations in the coming years to align with a national target for net zero by 2050. These changes are referred to as the Future Home Standard and the Future Building Standards and are expected to go into effect by 2025. We feel that these measures do not go far enough quickly enough. By omitting specific sustainability requirements through our local plan and waiting on changes to the building regulations, we would risk failing to achieve a net zero Reading by 2030. Local planning authorities are permitted to implement standards improving on limits set in the building regulations in order to drive a proportionate local response to climate change. We are working to gather all the evidence needed to support these policies and to ensure that high sustainability requirements do not hinder development. This slide outlines our overall direction of travel in terms of sustainability, and the themes listed here will be emphasized throughout the plan. These are requiring that the design and construction of buildings reduce energy use, emissions, and waste, providing low and no carbon energy sources on site, requiring adaptation measures to deal with extreme weather such as flooding or heat waves, making better use of accessible land in locations that will reduce the need for travel and encourage walking, cycling, and public transport use, reducing water use, and increasing biodiversity. And finally, each site will be subject to assessment for its environmental impacts to ensure that all development is fit to exist in a future Reading that is zero carbon. Significant changes are proposed to both policies CC2 and H5. CC2 deals with non-residential development and H5 is concerned with new homes. We are proposing that a new and clearer definition of net zero development is outlined, which emphasizes high fabric efficiency and reducing total energy use. A requirement for water neutrality, meaning that developments must employ or contribute to water saving measures that equal their consumption. A requirement for inclusion of on-site renewables to match total energy use. Absolute limits for space heating demand and total energy use. More as-built assessment and monitoring over time to ensure that buildings perform well during their occupation. A detailed exceptional basis clause, which states that where achieving these measures is not possible, for example, for reasons of viability, that the highest possible standards must be achieved. A presumption against demolition to reduce waste and encourage the reuse of existing buildings, and an assessment of embodied carbon, which aims to account for raw material extraction, transportation, manufacturing, and construction emissions. Finally, proposed changes to CC3 adaptation to climate change will give greater weight to adaptation measures in order to reduce the effects of climate change on our residents. And this may include green walls, green roofs, increased urban planting and tree cover to help cool our local environment, among other measures. Our existing design policy, CC7, design in the public realm, has also been amended to emphasize the adaptability of buildings over time, resilience in the face of our changing environment, and the efficient use of resources. This policy also emphasizes the importance of new development contributing to a multifunctional network of natural features and helps to ensure that new homes and buildings promote the health and well-being of residents. The changes to our sustainability policies are quite technical in nature, so we would encourage you to go to the consultation document itself and have a closer look, and please let us know if you have any further questions. We are proposing a change to require developers to submit a detailed assessment that would justify the need for any demolition before planning permission is granted. Should a demolition occur, we'd like to require 95% of all waste diverted from landfill. With this in mind, we'd like to ask, should Reading adopt a presumption against demolition? And we'll give you 30 seconds to answer. Okay, it looks like 66%, 6 respondents said that we should, and 3 were unsure. So we'll record that. In terms of biodiversity, the Environment Act 2021 introduces a new requirement for a 10% biodiversity net gain, and this will go into effect in January. If on-site provision is not possible, delivery off-site within a 10-kilometer buffer is suggested. We envision that the Kennett Valley East and the West Reading woodlands are areas of opportunity. In Reading, many town center sites may present with no existing biodiversity and therefore would not benefit from this requirement. Therefore, we'd like to retain a local plan policy to require that all sites, regardless of their existing habitat, achieve a net gain in biodiversity where possible. So now we'd like to ask, what level of biodiversity net gain should we be planning for? 10%? Do not update the policy or take into account the 10%, require on-site 10%, or increase the requirement to 20%. And I'll give you 30 seconds to answer. Okay, it looks like the majority said increase the on-site biodiversity net gain requirement to 20%. The plan outlines all the infrastructure that will be needed to deliver growth that is economically, environmentally, and socially sustainable. And we've published a separate standalone document called the Infrastructure Delivery Plan, or the IDP, which asks which schemes are needed, when will they be needed, who is responsible for their delivery, and how will they be funded. And this planning process it's ongoing, and it involves a high degree of collaboration with internal and external stakeholders. The infrastructure delivery plan and delivery table are included in section 13 of the consultation document and address the physical, green, and social and community infrastructure. These are broken down into subcategories that are listed here. It's very wide ranging and includes everything from water supply to school places and cultural facilities. The following major schemes have been identified. This is not an inclusive list, and a full list can be found in section 13 of the consultation document, and a more detailed narrative addressing each category is included in the standalone IDP. Major schemes include major transport projects to encourage active travel and improve the existing transport network, increased electricity capacity to enable new development and account for the increase in electricity demand that will result from zero carbon technologies such as electric vehicle charging and heat pumps, an increase in SEND or special education needs and disabilities places, additional capacity at doctors' surgeries, significant upgrades to the Royal Berkshire Hospital to enable a modern service, either on the existing site or on an alternative site in the future, significant changes to the Hexagon, and a new central library at the civic offices, among others. In addition to housing, sustainability, and infrastructure, we are also proposing changes to many of our other cross-cutting policies throughout the plan. Our existing policy CC7 design in the public realm has been updated to provide a basis for forthcoming local design codes. In the coming years, local planning authorities will be required by government to publish their own local design codes, and these will be informed by local evidence to ensure that all new development is reflective of our characteristics in Reading and is of high quality. Therefore, the objectives in CC7 have been amended to cover a broader range of design objectives and prepare the way for a local design code in Reading in the coming years. Our retail, leisure, and culture policies will be updated to refer to the latest data. We are commissioning further evidence to inform these changes. And finally, we are proposing that greater restrictions be placed on adult gaming centers and gambling establishments.
Thanks, Sarah. So moving on then to sites that have been put forward for development. Part of the consultation involves asking for your views on a number of sites that have been put forward to us. They're listed on the slide here, and details about all of these sites are in the appendix to the local plan consultation document in much more depth. The local plan is ultimately seeking to identify those that are suitable, in addition to the sites that are carried over from the existing plan, and there's quite a number of sites that will be carried forward from the existing plan. So I don't really propose here to go through the individual sites. There's probably too many of them for the time we've got available. However, in a more general sense, there are a few overall messages that I thought it was important to get across. The first one is that to emphasize that we have not yet made any judgment on whether these sites should be included, which is contrary to a rather unhelpful recent newspaper article. But we do want to ask for your views on these sites before we make those decisions. In addition, well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that I don't expect all of these sites to end up in the plan. I also think it's fair to say that many of those that have nominated a site have been reasonably ambitious about the amount of development they think the site that can accommodate, and that's what's set out in the suggestions in the plan document. Again, the council will need to do our own work to come to a view on how much development could be accommodated on those sites that we do consider to be suitable. Of those sites in the list, almost all have been put forward either for housing or for a mix of uses that include housing. As I mentioned before, housing remains our greatest need and it's the focus of national planning policy, so this is very much to be expected. However, some of these sites have also been nominated for some commercial development as part of a wider mix. Another point to make is that all of these sites are previously developed, so they're occupied by either buildings or hard standing. There aren't any sites that have been put forward that are primarily greenfield in nature. In addition, as you can see from the map, the focus of the sites that have come forward is very much the town centre, with a smattering in the south and the west. That does mean that our existing strategy in the plan of focusing development on the town centre with South Reading as a secondary focus is likely to continue in this plan. And I suppose the final point to make on sites generally is that these sites on their own are not going to fully make the difference in meeting our increased housing need. A lot of them are fairly small in size, and they'll, in order to meet increased need, there are likely to be increases on some of the sites that are already in the existing plan where that can be accommodated without causing other issues. So yeah, I didn't want to dwell on these sites any further. There's a lot of detail in the consultation document to look through, and please have your say on them. I expect there may well be some questions about some of these sites, which we'll come to in a minute.
Great, so I'm just going to discuss quickly how you can share your views and the next steps. So the scope and content document that is currently out for consultation contains a number of questions in relation to the updates that we would like for you to answer, which would really help us understand your views on the proposed updates. And to make this easy, we have set up an online questionnaire which lists out all the questions contained within the scope and content report, so you can cross-reference easily back to this. And please note, you can answer as little or as many questions as you want. You're not obliged to answer every single one. The URL for the questionnaire is shown on the screen, but you can also find this on our website if you need. Alternatively, you can respond to the consultation in writing via email or post. Again, the details are shown on the screen and available on our local plan update council website. The consultation runs until the 31st of January at 5 o'clock, so please make sure all of your comments are submitted by then, as it will be closing down at 5 p.m. that day. And I also wanted to mention that we do have additional evidence and background information in support of the consultation on our website, such as a sustainability appraisal, and more background evidence will be added to our website in due course, so keep an eye out for these documents as they are made available. So going on to the next steps, we will be reviewing the feedback from this current consultation early 2024 after it closes at the end of January. And we will then move on to another consultation on the pre-submission version of the local plan in the summer of 2024, with the aim of submitting the local plan to the Secretary of State in November 2024, and examination would then be anticipated early 2025, with adoption envisaged for summer 2025. But please note that these dates aren't final, and those last two in particular are subject to the planning inspectorate, but hopefully it just gives you an idea with what our timeframes are looking like at the moment. So we're now going to move on to questions. I can see we've had one or two put in the group chat, but please do put any more if you'd like, or send them across via email. I've seen one question that was submitted early on, which says that the local plan review refers to the call for sites exercise in some instances. Are the call for sites responses available for review?
I'll take that one then. We haven't tended to publish that in the past. I think I would need to take a view on it, and I suspect there may be some information in some of those that was provided on a confidential basis. So subject to that, we can potentially make them available as part of the evidence base. But yeah, as I say, I do need to check through, and I check what we said when we actually sent out the call for sites forms. I don't believe we said we'd be keeping them confidential, but yeah, let me double check, and we can let you know after the meeting.
Thank you, Mark. I can't see any other questions in the group chat unless I've missed something, but if anyone does have anything else to add, any questions, please pop them in the chat now, and we've got some time until 7 to have a go at answering them. So yeah, feel free to add your questions.
Casey, I can see a point's been made about the site at the corner of Crown Street and Southampton Street, which is that it needs to be included as a derelict site, which has been derelict empty for over 20 years. Then it could provide affordable housing close to the town centre. That site is in the existing plan as an allocation, and the intention is very much for that to be carried forward into the update. So we will have a look again at whether there's any changes we need to make to it, but it certainly should be part of the updated plan.
Thanks, Mark. So we have another comment. Pending the production of a design thing for Reading, how do we progress to improve the quality of designs in the meantime? Back to building beautiful, but ...
I'm happy to take this one. Thanks for your question. So I've been attending a lot of training behind the scenes to try to anticipate what the requirement for a local design code will mean for Reading. And we don't have all of the details yet, but I think it could be quite a positive tool. It will require quite a bit of resources and community involvement to get something really good published that will be a tool for our development management officers to use. And in the meantime, I think the best thing that we can do is have a very close look at CC7 and make sure that it says everything that we want it to say in a concise as way as possible. Mark, I'm not sure if you have anything to add on design.
I suppose the other thing that I might add is that the government have helpfully published some national model design code work themselves, which, you know, as someone who's watched what's come out of government for 20 years in planning, I think is definitely on the better end of the things that they've published. So that does have some status in that it's referred to as being of importance in national planning policy. So I think as a stopgap until we have our own local design codes, better use could be made of some of the things that are in those documents, because, as I say, they do. I think they would put us on the right course.
Thanks, Mark.
Sorry, Katie, I've just dropped the National Model Design Code guidance into the chat if anyone wants to have a look at that.
Great. Apologies, I see there's another question too, which says, we've been reviewing the content of the 10-year-old Reading 2050 strategy. Will this be woven through the updated plan?
I suppose a lot of it's down to timings, and when that review becomes available. We are our final stab at a draft of the local plan update is expected to be in July. So anything that can be fed in before then, we can take account of, and it's obviously very much in our interest that all the documents that provide the context to what happens in Reading are seen from the same hymn sheet. So we would certainly endeavour to do that, but at some point in summer next year we will have had done our what should be our final draft of the plan. So it is kind of down to what can be looked at in time.
Thanks, Mark. We've got a couple more people typing by the looks of it, so then maybe a few more questions forthcoming. If anyone has any questions as well that they'd like to send us after the meeting, that's absolutely fine if you want to email that across.
Yeah, I mean, if we can give it a couple more minutes, but if there aren't any more questions people want to raise in this forum, we're quite happy to give people the rest of their evening back.
We've got another question, or a couple more coming through now. So we've got one which says, will any other form of consultation responses be permitted other than individual comments in response to the questions in the consultation document? I'm happy to take this. We do welcome, obviously, responses to the questionnaire, but also you can send us comments in writing via email or in post if you have something else to say. That's certainly welcomed. Mark, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that one.
No, that's fine. We do guide people with these questionnaires because we often do get people who want to provide a response in that form, but if you want to provide a more kind of free form email or something, then that's absolutely fine.
Great. A couple of questions on heritage. So one question says there is increasing pressure on conservation areas. So can you update the appraisals, particularly those that are out of date? And then another question which says, where does heritage fit into this? And is there any chance of a heritage-led development?
Okay, so conservation area appraisals. We did start a process a few years ago of starting to review these conservation area appraisals through the Reading Conservation Area Advisory Committee, which is a voluntary body, at least one or two of whom are here in this meeting here now, who do an awful lot of great work on the conservation areas and on heritage generally in Reading. So led by them, the St Peters and Castle Hill, Russell Street, Oxford Road conservation area appraisals were refreshed, rewritten. And there is work ongoing on a couple of other appraisals. Obviously, we're reliant there very much on volunteers who are giving away their time to do this. They are. I know that the committee are very keen to get more people involved in refreshing these conservation area appraisals, and I'm sure would welcome anyone who wants to assist. Unfortunately, we struggle with the budget and the resources to get these things done within the council, which is why we're so appreciative of what the CAC have been doing for us. So we will be looking to update them as we can, but it's not likely to be the whole lot of them updated in the immediate future. So in terms of the other question, which is where does heritage fit in with this? I suppose taking it in the sense of the partial update, we have a number of existing heritage policies that we feel are about right. So that's why heritage hasn't been as big an element of the update as some of the other topics. In terms of heritage-led development, we do have a policy which we which goes some way down that route. Design codes are obviously another part of that answer. We would very much like to see heritage reflected in the quality of development that we're getting in the town. Obviously, it needs to be balanced with a number of other factors, but that I think the key vehicle that adds something onto our existing policy is likely to be through design coding. which is something we're going to need to come to in more depth once we're done with this partial update.
Thanks, Mark. We have another question which says, when is technical information referred to that will support RBC's approach to housing numbers likely to be available for external review?
Okay. I suppose I was slightly purposefully vague on the answer to that when I went through the slides, in that I don't have a date that I can give you at the moment. We are trying to get it out as soon as we can, with working with our consultants to make sure it's available. I would like it to be published during the consultation, but frankly, I don't think that's very likely. I would suspect it's going to be probably February at the earliest, but as soon as we have something, we will make it available to people.
Thanks, Mark. I can't see any more questions at the moment. Looks like someone's typing, so we can give it another minute or two. Okay, so a question that says, do the plan updates include sites now released by PDR review?
I've got to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what the question's asking there. So, I mean, where there's, in terms of PDR, so permitted development rights, I assume we're talking about kind of things like the office to residential conversions we've been seeing. I think with some of those that are existing kind of consents, we're just expecting those to happen. So we're not putting those sites in the plan. Some of them have expired, which in some cases is a very good thing. And we're certainly not looking to bring those sites forward because they were completely inappropriate for residential development. But I think we're going to be needing to take a kind of case-by-case view on some of those sites. I hope that kind of answers the question.
Okay, we've got another comment that says, no one wants to provide buildings, yet they are all in old buildings in the town centre. The NHS are pressing surgeries to modernise, and yet where is the identification of sites? How are you engaging with the surgeries who are under capacity stress?
Casey, I think that also relates to an earlier post in the chat as well. I think that's a follow-on.
Okay.
I'm happy to take this one.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
So through the infrastructure delivery plan work, we are trying to build a much stronger relationship with our NHS contacts to look at an estate strategy. So we're going to have our NHS contacts provide us with a lot more detailed information about which sites are in need of updates. We've also been able to get from them, from the Integrated Care Board, some costs that are quite specific in terms of what needs to be provided. So this will give our officers a tool that they can take to developers with quite a specific ask. This is all published in the consultation document. It's on page 102. So we're looking for additional capacity at existing surgeries associated with development and reconfiguration or relocation of any existing sites that are not fit for purpose. And then there may be restructuring of surgeries into fewer, larger, more fit for purpose facilities that can host a wider range of co-located services. So the model for delivery for GP practices is going to change quite a bit over the next decade. But we're also working to get larger, fully fitted facilities provided by the developer, perhaps on the ground floor of new build flatted developments in the center, in addition to some larger hubs that are located throughout the borough.
Yeah, just to add to that, Sarah, I think it's fair to say that engaging, it's very difficult to engage on this topic, and the Integrated Care Board, who are the kind of overarching organisation that looks at this issue, emphasised with us over and over again that GP practices are all individual businesses with kind of individual circumstances and different aspirations, and a GP who might be approaching retirement or not, and that they've all got very different things going on, and that does make it quite difficult to plan kind of strategically. So I think the best way for us to be doing that is to have those conversations through the Integrated Care Board, who who know their individual GP practices, and to try and get that kind of detail that Sarah's referred to worked into the plan, and try and meet those needs wherever we can, wherever a site gives us that opportunity to do so.
Thanks, Mark. We've got another comment that says, ease of access to central and other facilities have reduced seriously over recent years. Will you be reviewing RBC's attitude to this?
Okay. I mean, on this one, I think what would be useful is maybe to take that one away and respond to it with a bit more detail of what the question's asking, because I'm not necessarily entirely sure I know what specifically is being referred to here. So if the person making the question wants to send that directly to us, we can look at that in a bit more detail, but I don't want to expound on something now that's not going to be answering the question at all.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, so just send us an email at our planning policy email address, and we can provide a bit more detail on that one. We've got a couple more minutes for any final questions people might have.
Shall I maybe start wrapping up then?
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Okay. I can see one quick question on educational capacity. I think Sarah's kind of already touched on that in her part of the presentation. The main need that has been identified is around SEND, so special education needs, and that's something that's addressed in a bit more detail in the plan document. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for attending tonight. We really appreciate it, and we're able to let you go pretty much on time, which is pretty good. So we will, as we say, we will circulate the slides. We will circulate, pick up on the questions, and provide some of the answers to that, and also to anything that you send in immediately afterwards. Otherwise, please have a look at the consultation and please provide your response. And yeah, we're very grateful for it. Thank you very much.